Hello everybody and welcome to the follow-up PowerPoint presentation that I am going to narrate for you. This is the PowerPoint presentation that I use to teach in continuing education our new policies and procedures. I am recording this from home, so if my dogs suddenly start barking in the background, I apologize. I will try to pause the recording if that happens, but just bear with me. So this presentation, if you've already seen this during one of the continuing educations, has been updated. So I've added a slide and there are a couple additional questions that have been brought up that I have been able to answer in some of the other continuing educations that I've added to this PowerPoint presentation. So if you've already seen the presentation, I'm glad you're watching this because you're going to get to learn even more. So in the continuing education, we talked about why we follow up, which everybody listed pretty well. We follow up with callers to make sure that resources worked, to check in and see how they're doing, and also because a good majority of suicidal people that we talk to do not have anyone else to turn to. No one else that they can talk about their thoughts of suicide, or no one that they feel comfortable talking with. Our follow-ups are a service. We are there to support our callers. And that's how it should be explained to them as well, that this is a service and something meant to be supportive, not to be us pestering them. Why are we making these changes? Well, a few of us went to the American Association of Suicidology conference back in April and learned about some evidence-based practices when it comes to follow-ups. Since that time, we haven't really had the ability to make these updates and didn't really feel too pressured to do that. However, once we determined this national backup was going to start, we thought that it might be a good time to really make sure that our practices are matching up with what is evidence-based. So we're changing it now in addition because we have a training class that actually starts this Friday. And so we wanted to have everybody up and running with this new procedures before this class was out on their own. Now these procedures will begin on Monday, October 24th at 7 a.m. Again, Monday, October 24th at 7 a.m., these procedures will start. Anybody who is already in follow-ups with our old procedures will continue with our old procedures. You don't need to try to convert old procedures into this new one. Just continue with the old, and just anyone new who calls in Monday with thoughts of suicide, we will use these procedures and policies. Now, what are the benefits to these new follow-up procedures? Well, you get time frames as opposed to set times, which really gives us a lot more flexibility in when we schedule our follow-ups, both for our callers' benefit and then also for our benefit for our scheduling, so we're not overwhelmed the way that we have been. Additionally, the benefit of this is that we've learned through research that the 7 days after somebody expresses suicidal ideation are really the highest risk for that person to attempt or to complete suicide. These new follow-ups really kind of expand to about 7 or 10 days outside the time of the call. If you think about it right now, if we have an immediate high-risk caller, a lot of the times we're done following up with them in 2, 3, maybe 4 days. And somebody who is at that high of a risk with us discontinuing so early, it's a little bit concerning if you think about it now. So it's beneficial to our callers and it's beneficial to us. What are the drawbacks? It's something new and it's something different that may seem complicated. However, while teaching the continuing educations, I've had some people who've practiced reading scenarios and then scheduling out the follow-ups. The first one always seemed to be the most difficult, and I slowly watched as people got to the 5th one and really kind of started to understand the concepts. So I don't want you to listen to this presentation and feel completely lost. Once you get into doing it, it will be much, much simpler for you, and you will see how it plays out. Is very similar to really what we're already doing. So with our follow-ups, there are now 6 progressive stages. starting with stage six, which has the follow-up with the shortest time period, going down to a step 1. The risk level that you determine a caller is at determines which stage you begin. So the most stages we have are 6, and that will be our immediate high, which you'll see here in a second. All risk levels will be followed up with at 28 days after at-risk contact, which I better describe on the next slide. 28 days is the average follow-up time closing for Lifeline Network centers, and it's a good 3-4 weeks after a caller has contacted the hotline, which gives us time to check in, see if they've gotten to see a doctor, if they've talked with family and friends, if we offered them hope after, have they gotten involved with that. It's a really good way for us to just check in and let the callers know that we care. Now, just like we had before, you'll see a lot of commonalities. Our default risk level is stage 4, which is the equivalent to our current medium. So if somebody calls and you give the opening script and they say yes to thoughts of suicide and then immediately hang up the phone, they are still at medium risk level, which is going to be stage 4, the 6 to 12 hours for follow-up. So here's a bit of a glossary. An at-risk contact is the last time we've talked to somebody and they've said yes to thoughts of suicide. This does not count for our chronically suicidal callers. Again, anybody who's chronically suicidal who we've determined says yes or sometimes, all the time, often, every day to thoughts of suicide, those people we need to figure out what their baseline is for suicidality. So if we ask them on a scale of 1 to 4, what is your normal? And their normal is a 2. And then we ask them, okay, so what are you today? And they say 2, just like before, this is the same policy and procedure, we would consider that a no. However, if they say, well, today I'm a 3, and their normal is that 2, then it's a yes, and that's an at-risk contact. Just remember, an at-risk contact is when somebody is at risk for suicide. We've also put a label to some procedures that we've never really termed before, and that would be this negative police contact procedure. So it's supplemental steps that you plug into your follow-up stages for when the police either cannot find a caller who's suicidal, or once they find the caller completely denies being suicidal. Excuse me. Our next term, hospitalization procedures, same idea, supplemental steps for our follow-ups for when the caller is transported to the hospital. Again, this is just kind of plugged into the current stages that you're going to be following. It's just a little additional side step. And we've labeled each of the steps in the follow-ups as stages, so somebody will move through the stages of follow-ups. So here are our stage descriptions. How I've described this to most and how I've seen this is that when you're talking to a caller, you will rate them either immediate high, high, medium, low. If a caller is immediate high, as opposed to stepping down to a low risk level, a medium risk level, or anything down that way, they're going to progress through stages. So they're not going to progress through risk levels, they're going to progress through stages. Unless, let's say on a Monday you speak to a caller who you determine is medium risk level. We follow up with them in 12 to 24 hours. So we follow up with them the next day on Tuesday. And Tuesday they say, you know what, last night I went out and bought a gun. That's going to bump them from a medium risk level to a high and change what stage we're talking to the caller. Otherwise, if the caller says no to thoughts of suicide, they progress down to the next stage. If they say yes to thoughts of suicide and their plans have not changed, they remain at the same level they currently are. So as you can see, stage 6, we follow up with a caller in 1 hour. Stage 5 is 6 to 10 hours with an additional 2-hour window, allowing callback for voicemail. So it's 6 to 10 hours, or you can look at it as 6 to 12. Either is fine. Stage 4 is 12 to 24 hours. Stage 3 is 24 to 48 hours. Stage 2 is 4 to 7 days, and this is also where Hope After is offered. Now, stage 6 through 2 really fall somewhere within 7 to 10 days of the original call. And then our final stage 1 is 28 days from last at-risk contact. This is the only follow-up that is like this. So this means that your final follow-up, stage 1, will... Sorry. I apologize. That was a trailer driving down the street. Okay. So the 28 days from last at-risk contact means that it'll be 4 weeks from the last time the person said yes to thoughts of suicide. So if on Monday they say yes to thoughts of suicide, we progress through the stages and they've said no to all of our other contacts, our final 28-day follow-up will be 4 weeks after that first call on Monday. I have a calendar coming up here in a minute that I will show everybody. So let's move on and look at each of the risk levels. So take a peek at immediate high. If you don't have it out right now, I suggest you take it out. The follow-up chart, the inverted orange pyramid, that will really help you visualize what this looks like. So immediate high has the most stages. It starts at stage 6. We follow up with our callers in 1 hour. After that 1 hour, if the caller says no to thoughts of suicide, we move to stage 5, which is 6 to 10 hours with that additional 2-hour window, allowing for a return voicemail. Then we move to stage 4, which is 12 to 24 hours. And then 3, which is 24 to 48 hours. Stage 2, which is 4 to 7 days, which is where we also offer Hope After if the caller is a Missouri resident, 18 years of age or older. And then finally, stage 1, which is 28 days after last at risk. Many of these procedures are exactly the same as they currently are, including this. If there is no contact at the first follow-up with our immediate high-risk callers, we are going to perform what's called an active rescue. That's the term Lifeline uses, or we use Wellness Check, with pager's permission. And once you have called that caller, call the police, you'll schedule for a 2-hour check-in with the police, just like we do right now. After we contact the police, you'll then have 3 options of what to do next. You will either follow the negative police contact procedures, the hospitalization procedures, or you will call the person back and you'll reevaluate their risk level. We'll talk more about this a little bit in a moment. So this is the high risk level. As you can see, this time we start at stage 5. So our first callback is about 6 to 10 or 12 hours outside of the time of the call. The next follow-up is 12 to 24. The next follow-up is 24 to 48. The next follow-up is 4 to 7 days. And the final follow-up is 28 days. If there's no answer, the first follow-up for a high risk and we leave a voicemail, we give them the 2 hours for a return call for a total of 12. If there's no answer when we try to call them 2 hours later, still during that same stage 5, we may call the police for an active rescue or wellness check, and then we would schedule a check-in with the PD for 2 hours, just like we do right now. Depending upon what the outcome is with the police department would determine whether we follow our negative police contact procedures, hospitalization procedures, or if we end up just reevaluating the person's risk level. And just a little reminder, I have a few of these thrown in throughout, that we will never do 2 wellness checks without new information such as contact information, an address, a last name, anything along those lines. Let's move on to medium. So medium risk level starts at stage 4, 12 to 24 hours. Stage 3, 24 to 48 hours. Stage 2, which is 4 to 7 days, and that's when, again, we offer hope after. And stage 1, 28 days after last at risk. We will almost never ever do an active rescue or wellness check at this risk level. If we do, it's almost always for our minors. And I want to point out one of the benefits to us having these time frames this way. In the past, we have had calls where, while we only had 4 risk levels of low, medium, high, immediate high, we would kind of classify the callers as, let's say, a medium high because they're somewhere in between medium and high risk. Now, if that's the case and you feel like someone is a medium risk based upon the suicide risk assessment, but there's some aspects that make them a little higher than what we would consider standard, you can follow up at the 12 hours instead of the 24. This gives us a lot more flexibility. Talk about low risk. This starts with stage 3, so that's 1 to 2 days later of follow-ups. Stage 2, 4 to 7 days, offer hope after. And then our stage 1, 28 days after last at risk. And again, we will almost never do active rescue or a wellness check at this risk level. Next, we're going to pull up an example calendar and kind of go over a very simple explanation of what this looks like. Now, I accidentally put an extra row for the month in there, which was pointed out to me today, and so just ignore that. So let's say we get a call on Monday, and we determine that the caller is low risk. So they're low risk, which means, looking at your chart, we follow up in 1 to 2 days. So we schedule our follow-up, stage 3, for Wednesday. When we talk to them on Wednesday, they say that no, they are not having any thoughts of suicide, so we progress through the stages to stage 2, which is 4 to 7 days later, so we call them on Sunday. So I'd like to highlight that stage 3 follow-up would be what we'd consider our last contact. Our contact on Monday is our last at-risk contact because all the other days they said no to thoughts of suicide. So when we're scheduling our stage 1 follow-up, which is 28 days after last at-risk contact, then that would be right here. 4 weeks down, 28 days later would be our final stage 1 follow-up. Now we're going to talk about our terms. Negative police contact. Negative police contact procedures. Again, if the police cannot contact the caller or the caller says no, that they are not suicidal, just as our current procedures, you must call the caller back immediately. These next steps are what you do after you've called the caller back immediately. So let's start off and say, for an example, that we've attempted to call a caller at midnight. They don't answer the phone, so we call the police and we ask the police to check on them. We call the police back at 2 a.m. The police say, oh yeah, we went out there. We talked to the person. They said they're fine. Hang up the phone and immediately call the caller back at 2 a.m., calling them to see what's going on. If the caller answers, reevaluate their risk. You will most likely start with a stage 6 or 5 follow-up because their risk level was high enough for us to call the police in the first place. If they don't answer, start with stage 6, thus calling them back in 1 hour. So it's 2 a.m. that we've called them back immediately. They don't answer the phone. We schedule the follow-up for 3 a.m. If we try them at 3 a.m., and they don't answer, then we will follow up at stage 5 for 48 hours. This is very similar to what we currently do, where we follow up at medium risk 2 times a day for 2 days. We are doing the same here. 2 calls in 1 day, about 6 to 10 hours apart, between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. of the caller's time zone. This 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. is the expansion of our courtesy time, which used to be 9 to 9, and now it's 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Obviously, you should talk with all of your callers about follow-ups and what times works best for them, whether they'll be awake, whether they'll be at work, and so on. If we still cannot contact the caller in those 48 hours, we've made those 2 calls each day for 2 days, then we're going to schedule the next follow-up for 7 days after the last at-risk contact. Okay? And offer hope after. If they don't answer at that 7 days, we're going to go ahead and schedule them for 28 days after the last at-risk contact. Post-hospitalization. Instead of following up at 7 days for post-hospitalization, it is now 4 to 7 days, with us preferring you to schedule it for 4. This is because, as you've probably experienced, a good majority of callers are not hospitalized for 7 days. So we want to try to catch them as soon as they are released, as opposed to 3 or 4 days later when they are kind of left without any support and resources. After we spoke with them the 4 to 7 days later, you schedule their stage 1 follow-up for 28 days after the last at-risk. If we've scheduled a post-hospitalization and there's no answer on that first attempt, reschedule it for 3 days later. If they are still hospitalized at that first contact, we want to make the assumption that they may be hospitalized for another couple of days and give them time to get released. If on that second attempt there is no answer, go ahead and reschedule for the stage 1 28 days later. Now here's some outline of procedures that we've talked about before but have never really put to paper. If a caller or a third party who's with the caller says that they are going to take them to the hospital all on their own, you should follow up with them in 1 hour to see if they've arrived at the hospital. It's not nearly as crucial to find out if this person was hospitalized, because most likely they are not at a high or immediate high risk, otherwise we would have called the police in the first place. Once you've called them at that 1 hour and you confirm that they've just arrived at the ER, begin the follow-ups from that point on at the appropriate stage level. Now that would be, if you determine that they are low risk, that would be the 1 to 2 days later. If they're medium, that would be the 12 to 24 hours later. This is different than what sometimes is currently done, because sometimes crisis workers will evaluate somebody as immediate high just because they decided to go to the hospital. However, we do have callers who call with no plan, no time frame, never been suicidal, no prior attempts, but they decide that they want to go to the hospital anyway. That person is at low risk, and we should follow up appropriately after determining that they've gotten to the hospital. Now, if the police took the caller to the hospital, our procedures are almost identical to what they were before. Follow up at stage 5 in about 6 to 10 hours to confirm whether or not the person was admitted or whether they were treated and released. If they were treated and released, we're going to follow up at stage 5, again, those 6 to 10 hours. Once we've confirmed that they're in the hospital, follow up at stage 2, so go to the 4 to 7 days. Here's just a refresher of some things. Third-party adults, follow-ups, all procedures are the same. Always offer to call the person at risk and then make the attempt as well. Do not just tell the caller, oh, give them our number and tell them to give us a call. No, you should be offering and then also contacting whoever they are worried about. If you attempt to contact the person at risk, they do not answer. We do not leave a voicemail. If you do speak with the person at risk, determine their risk level and then follow up appropriately. If you reach the person at risk and they say they are not suicidal, or you're unable to reach them at all, then we do not follow up. When it comes to our minors, most of the procedures are the same. We must speak with a trusted adult. We must attempt to contact them immediately, no matter the hour of the day. If it's 2 in the morning, it's 3 in the afternoon, and mom or dad are at work, we must attempt to contact the person immediately, right then and there. Additionally, we really should avoid taking any sort of school trusted adults when it's Friday through Sunday. We usually can't get a hold of a school trusted adult during those times. There have been exceptions where somebody has a coach, where they have the coach's phone number, which can work. However, if you hang up with the minor, attempt to call the trusted adult, and the trusted adult does not answer, we need to be calling the minor back immediately and getting another adult. We still have the 12 hours for us to contact. If we do not speak with a trusted adult in those 12 hours, we will be sending the police for a wellness check. Now, this is something that's different. If we've spoken with the trusted adult, we will continue to follow up with the minor at their risk level. As it stands right now, we speak to a trusted adult, follow up with the minor one more time, make sure that the adult is giving them a hand, and then discontinue follow-ups. From now on, we will continue to follow up with the minor just as if they are in regular follow-up, so up to about a week or so, and then 28 days later. Third-party minors. Again, procedures remain the same. Get trusted adult info for both the caller and the person at risk. If we can't get any info on the minor at risk, we will call the caller back every 6 to 12 hours for 2 days to see if they have more information, such as if they know each other through Kik. We're going to ask our caller to see if they can't get the person at risk's name, phone number, that sort of information. We will never send a wellness check if we have not spoken at the minor at risk. And the way to get around that is if you have a minor who's calling worried about a minor friend who seems to be at a fairly high risk for suicide, that you conference call with the police and your caller. This way, you can facilitate this conversation and be sure that the police have been notified. Follow-up refusals. If we are following up with a minor and there's a credible adult who wishes us to discontinue and there's no suspicion of abuse, we can stop follow-ups with pager permission. All of these are with pager permission. Also with adults, once somebody is at stage 3, the equivalent to low risk, just as our policy stands now, we can discontinue follow-ups. If somebody is at a higher risk, let's say medium or high, there is a possibility that we will discontinue follow-ups with them if they are extremely adamant. Again, you need to speak with pager to get permission to do this and to determine whether or not it's appropriate for your caller. We have had some struggles with this new national backup that some of our callers really do not want us following up, and we're going to have to take that as a almost case-by-case basis. Closing follow-ups. So if you have a caller who is low and medium, if there are 3 no contacts in those 7 to 10 days, then you're going to go to stage 1 for the follow-up in 28 days from last at risk. If they're high and immediate high, we will have most likely have done some sort of wellness check. Otherwise, it will be 4 no contacts, and then we will move to stage 1 and follow up in the 28 days from last at risk. If on that 28-day follow-up we get a no to thoughts of suicide or the person does not answer, we are going to close it out. So on stage 1 follow-up, 28 days later, if we reach the person and they say no to thoughts of suicide, we will close it. If we attempt to contact the person, we do not reach them, we will close it. Again, you need to call pager first just to make sure and that all the procedures have been followed appropriately. Now, I know this was a lot of information and could have been pretty confusing. Again, I really recommend that you take a look at the follow-up chart, the inverted orange pyramid. You need to speak with your supervisor. I have provided all of them with a follow-up worksheet, and I suggest you pull out a couple of call reports for suicidal callers and work out when you would schedule the follow-ups in our new policies and procedures. Again, I watched other people complete these tasks, and after some practice, they began to really grasp the concepts, and the majority of crisis workers who learned it really saw the value in this new method and how it could really help us to lower our number of follow-ups in a day and also really be more supportive of our callers. Okay, guys, sorry for the barking there. I am back again. But if you have any questions, please contact me, Daniel, or Stephanie. Lesmeyer, we were on the team that created this and put this together, or speak with your supervisors. And please remember, this is going to be a learning process both for staff and for crisis workers. Just bear with us as we work everything out. And I know that you all can do this. Just remember, when you started, our regular follow-up procedures were kind of complicated and confusing, but after practice, you were able to understand them. I do not doubt that that'll be the case for these as well. I'll talk to you later. Bye.